So you're in the kitchen and you've got this beautiful wooden cutting board. You've been told to treat it with a food-safe finish. But what does that even mean? It seems like every company slaps that label on their product. But has anyone actually put them to the test? I mean a real head-to-head, no-holds-barred test to see what happens when food, water, and knives meet these finishes in the real world. Everyone claims their finish is the best, the most protective, the safest. But claims are just words. I wanted data. I wanted to see for myself which finish actually stands up to the job so we can finally separate the marketing fluff from the scientific fact. To do this, I decided to run a proper experiment. We're not just comparing apples and oranges here. We're going full-on scientific method. I started by making 5 absolutely identical cutting boards. Same block of hard maple, same dimensions, same sanding process. Everything was controlled. The only variable, the only thing different between these 5 boards, was the finish applied to them. This is how you get clean, reliable data. By isolating the one thing we're testing, we can be confident that any differences we see are because of the finish itself and not some other random factor. And here's the most important part: we followed the instructions to the letter. No shortcuts. Each board was prepped exactly the same way, and each finish was applied and given its full recommended cure time. We're talking weeks for some of these. Because if a finish isn't fully cured, the test is meaningless. We're testing them at their absolute best, under ideal conditions, to see which one truly deserves to be in your kitchen. So, are a bunch of these food-safe finishes actually a lie? Let's find out. The results are going to surprise you. First up, we have the classic, the one your grandpa probably used, good old mineral oil. It's cheap, it's easy to find, and it's been the go-to for generations. Application is simple. You just flood the surface, let it soak in, and wipe off the excess. It gives the wood this nice, rich, wet look, which is super satisfying. After letting it cure properly, the first thing I noticed was a slight, almost greasy residue. It wasn't sticky, but you could feel it on your fingers. There wasn't really a smell, which is a good start. But the real test begins now. How will it handle what a cutting board is actually designed for? Let's get to the science. Our first test was water absorption. I poured a standardized amount of water onto the board and let it sit for an hour. And the results were, well, not great. The mineral oil offered some initial resistance, with the water beating up nicely at first. But over time, you could see the water slowly seeping into the wood fibers, creating a dark, damp patch. After wiping it away, the area was noticeably swollen and raised. This tells us that mineral oil is more of a temporary water repellent than a true waterproofer. It traps moisture right at the surface, which is not what you want in a board that gets washed regularly. Next up, the stain and knife test. I chopped beets on it, the ultimate stain test, and used a brand new super sharp chef's knife to simulate regular use. The knife marks were deep and immediate. The oil provided almost zero protection against the blade, with fibers tearing easily. And the beet juice? It soaked right in, leaving a vibrant purple stain that was impossible to scrub out. It seems mineral oil doesn't create a hard protective barrier. It just soaks into the wood, which means anything you cut on it can also soak right in, along with any bacteria. Not a great start for our food-safe champion. Okay, next in the lineup is the popular upgrade to mineral oil, a beeswax blend. The idea here is that the beeswax adds a harder, more water-resistant layer on top of the oil-soaked wood. It's usually sold as a paste or a cream, and you rub it in, let it sit, and then buff it to a nice, low-sheen finish. Right away, it felt better than the plain mineral oil. After buffing, there was no greasy residue, and it had a very faint, pleasant, honey-like smell. The surface felt smoother, silkier. It definitely felt more like a finish and less like just oily wood. My hopes were higher for this one. This seems like a logical next step, but does the science back it up? We ran the same water test. 1 hour with a pool of water sitting on the surface. Initially, the performance was stellar. The water beaded up beautifully, like rain on a freshly waxed car. It looked like nothing was getting through. However, after the full hour, a ghost of a dark spot was visible underneath the water. When I wiped it away, the wood was damp, though not nearly as soaked as the mineral oil board. The beeswax definitely helped, but it wasn't a perfect seal. It seems that over time, water can still find its way through the microscopic pores in the wax, creating a moisture trap against the wood. Then came the knife and the beets. The beeswax blend offered slightly more resistance to the knife. The cuts didn't seem quite as deep or fuzzy, suggesting the wax was providing a bit of a buffer. It was a marginal improvement, but an improvement nonetheless. As for the stain, it did a better job here too. The beet juice beaded up on the surface for a while before it started to seep in. After cleaning, there was still a noticeable pink stain, but it was far less intense than the one on the mineral oil board. So, an improvement across the board, but we're still seeing issues with moisture and staining. It's better, but is it good enough? Now we're moving into the world of polymerizing oils with pure tung oil. Unlike mineral oil, which just sits in the wood, tung oil undergoes a chemical reaction with oxygen and actually hardens inside the wood fibers to form a solid, waterproof polymer. This is serious stuff. However, it comes with a major catch: the cure time. We're not talking hours or days. We're talking weeks. We had to let this board sit for a full 30 days to ensure it was completely cured. During that time, it had a very distinct, nutty smell that eventually faded. Once cured, the surface felt hard and dry, almost like there was nothing on it at all. It looked natural, not plasticky. Time for the water test, and this is where things got interesting. I poured the water on and it just sat there, perfectly beaded, showing no signs of soaking in. After an hour, I wiped it off, and the wood underneath was bone dry. Not damp, not discolored, perfectly dry. It was as if the water was never there. This is what a real seal looks like. The polymerized tung oil had effectively turned the top layer of wood into a waterproof composite. This is a complete game changer, because if water can't get in, then bacteria and mold have nowhere to grow. So it aces the water test, but what about the knife and the stain? The knife marks were noticeably shallower. Because the oil hardens within the wood fibers, it makes the surface itself more dense and resistant to cutting. The blade still cut, of course. It's a cutting board, but it didn't tear the fibers in the same way. And the beet juice? It sat on the surface just like the water did. I let it sit for a few minutes, wiped it away, and nothing. No stain, not a hint of pink or purple. It wiped away clean, leaving the wood pristine. This is the level of performance I was hoping to see. It takes patience, but the results so far are in a completely different league. Alright, this is the one I was most curious about. A product sold right off the shelf, labeled in big bold letters, food safe varnish. This is what most people would probably reach for. It promises the durability of a varnish with the safety of a food-grade finish. It brushed on easily and formed a glossy plastic-like film on the surface. It looked and felt like a tabletop finish, not a cutting board finish. It cured relatively quickly, in about 72 hours, and had a chemical smell that lingered for a few days. Once cured, the surface was hard and slick. My gut feeling was that this was a bad idea for a cutting surface, but let's see what the tests say. The water test was, as expected, perfect. A varnish is essentially a thin layer of plastic. The water beaded up and sat on top indefinitely. After an hour, the wood underneath was completely dry. So, from a pure water blocking perspective, it's a 10 out of 10. But a cutting board isn't a boat hull. It has to do more than just repel water. The problem with a film finish like this is that it sits on top of the wood, it doesn't penetrate it. And that creates a major point of failure, which we're about to see. Here's where it all went wrong. The knife test. The very first chop with the knife didn't just cut the wood, it chipped and cracked the varnish. With every subsequent cut, the finish splintered, creating tiny fissures and cracks all over the surface. Now think about that. We've just compromised the seal. When I poured beet juice on it, the juice seeped directly into those cracks, getting trapped underneath the layer of varnish. It was impossible to clean. Water from washing would do the same thing, getting trapped under the finish and turning the wood gray and moldy over time. This finish failed spectacularly. It proves that being waterproof isn't enough. A cutting board finish has to be maintainable and can't crack under use. For our final test, we had to try one of those viral internet methods you see all over social media. The one we chose was a popular DIY concoction of coconut oil and lemon juice. The claim is that it's all natural, smells great, and the lemon juice helps to clean the board. It was simple to make, just mix and wipe it on. It definitely smelled the best out of all of them, like a tropical vacation. The board looked great for about 5 minutes, with a nice sheen from the coconut oil. But coconut oil is not a drying oil, and I had a strong suspicion about what would happen next. This is a classic case of something that sounds good in theory, but might fail in practice. We let it cure for a day, though it never truly hardens. The surface remained oily to the touch. The water test was an immediate failure. Water didn't bead at all. It just soaked straight into the wood as if there were no finish on it whatsoever. The coconut oil offered zero water resistance. In fact, it might have been worse because the oil-water mixture seemed to create a soupy mess. After an hour, the board was completely saturated, dark, and swollen. This is a one-way ticket to a warped, cracked, and moldy cutting board. It's the exact opposite of what you want a finish to do. As you can probably guess, the knife and stain tests were just as bad. The knife cut through the wood like it was bare, and the beet juice left a deep, permanent stain instantly. But there's a bigger, more scientific problem here. Coconut oil can go rancid. Unlike mineral oil, which is highly refined, organic oils like coconut oil will oxidize over time and develop a foul, stale smell and taste. The last thing you want is rancid oil from your cutting board leaching into your fresh food. This viral hack wasn't just ineffective. It's genuinely a bad idea that could ruin your board and your food. It's a perfect example of why you can't always trust what you see online. So after all that testing, what did we learn? We saw finishes that were greasy, finishes that trapped moisture, finishes that cracked, and one that went rancid. But through it all, one finish performed perfectly across every single test. The Pure Tung oil board was the only one that remained completely neutral. It didn't have any weird residue or smell once it cured. It completely blocked water without creating a plastic film, meaning it can't trap moisture underneath. And most impressively, it resisted stains completely, wiping clean every time. It created a hard, durable, and truly protective surface that became one with the wood itself. This whole experiment proves a really important point. The term food safe on a label is, at best, a starting point, and at worst, completely misleading. It doesn't tell you how a finish will actually perform in the real world, under the stress of knives, water, and acidic foods. Real safety and performance aren't about marketing claims. They're about how the finish behaves over time. It's about creating a surface that is durable, non-absorbent, and won't fail in a way that traps bacteria. It's about the science of how the material interacts with your food and your tools. So, the next time you're choosing a finish, think beyond the label. Think about the physics and chemistry of what's happening. Were you surprised by these results? I know I was. If you were too, hit that like button. And if you want to see me take the winning board and put it through a year-long durability test against a brand new board, comment board down below for part 2. You won't want to miss what we test next, so make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for nerding out with me.